Alright, welcome to another hickory hack. Today we're whipping the shaft, which is the final step in getting a hickory-shafted golf club ready for play. Whipping is more than just a decorative touch on a hickory-shafted golf club. It actually serves a function, and we'll talk about that over the course of this video. First, we're going to start with whipping the top and bottom of the grip. I'm using 4-ply waxed Irish linen thread from Crawford Threads, and I like this handy thread puller as well. And if you don't have one of these, I'll show you how to use a regular piece of whipping thread to do the same thing. So the first thing we're going to do is take a knife and, working on the low end of the grip, shave an angled cut into the end of the leather. The idea here is you're trying to create a taper for the whipping thread to climb from the shaft into the grip with a nice smooth gradient. And I like to go around with scissors just to clean up the raggedness so that it's as smooth as possible. This is a good opportunity to highlight the most essential tool in my kit for all of my projects, which is this whipping stand from Hickory Golf Workshop. It's especially handy for whipping because of the spool stick and the different cradle options you have for holding the club. So we're going to start here by just putting a standard knot on the shaft. You want that to be as tight as possible so that the thread doesn't slip when you start spinning it. And you want to make sure there's a nice extra long piece of thread that you can whip on top of, and I'll show you the purpose of that in a second. So once I'm sure it's not going to slip, I'll hold the thread tight as I turn the club. And I'm going to wrap the whipping just about up to where the leather begins. And at this point, I'm going to cut the excess off, and then that's where you're going to put your thread puller in. So this is about the halfway point of the entire whip, and I'm going to start whipping again now with the thread puller underneath the whipping. Again, making sure it's tight and that each strand of whip is next to each other uniformly. And I'll do about the same number of spins as I did before I put the thread puller in. You'll clip that and you'll just kind of feed that through the loop. Take the thread puller and pull that back through the half of whipping that you wrapped on top of the thread puller. And that keeps it tight. So now for the other end of the grip, I slip the club into the holes on the whipping stand. Again, another handy feature of this so that the club doesn't flop around on you. And same story. I'm going to make a knot, make sure it's tight, fold over the excess, and then start whipping on top of that. But unlike the other end of the grip, I'm only going to go around 3 or 4 times here before I cut the excess and put the thread puller in. For the most part, whipping thread on the grip is decorative, but in the instance that the tacks might start slipping, the thread will help keep the leather on the grip. So now I'll use a regular long piece of whipping thread as a thread puller. Really simple process here. Just like before, you lay that loop down to whip on top of it, making sure there's plenty for you to pull on the other end. I'll just do another 3 or 4 spins before I cut the thread, feed it through the loop, and then pull back through. Now you want to have at least 3 or 4 lines of whipping to pull that through, otherwise you're not going to have much of a space to set that knot. So now we're going to move on to whipping above the hosel, which is actually a functional aspect of whipping thread. Just like on the grip, we're going to make a knot. This one gets a little trickier sometimes because the knot can slip on top of a freshly shellacked shaft. But once you're sure it's tight, start spinning, and it's the same process as you used on the grip. Now the purpose of whipping the area above the hosel is to actually reinforce the shaft in an area where it's going to get stressed during a swing. This is a niblick, which is a club I don't normally use a full swing with, so I'm just going to whip directly above the hosel. But if this was a mashie or a mid-iron, I'd add 2 or 3 more areas of whipping up the shaft above the hosel, just to make sure that I had proper reinforcement along the area of the shaft that's being stressed the most. You noticed here that I'd used an alternating black-red whipping thread. That's about as fancy as I get, and I'll share a link in the description so you can see some other creative ways people use whipping thread. So after I cut that little bit off of the extra thread, I push the whipping thread down the shaft to make sure it's as tight as possible. You notice all of the knots are on the back of the shaft, so you don't see that when you're looking down at the club. And this one is ready for play. That'll wrap up this hickory hack. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.